Hi everyone, you're all very welcome. I see everyone's just filtering in there. We've got a pretty big group today, so we're going to have everyone muted, as I'm sure you've realized by now. And that's just because if we have a load of mics on in the background, we get a lot of feedback and then nobody can hear anything that's being said. So if everyone wants to just relax for a few moments, and we're going to give it a minute while everyone filters in. Our panelists are all here, I believe. We've got a pretty jam-packed day, and I'll run through the agenda with you in just a moment. So yeah, if everyone wants to settle down, I'll leave it for 5 minutes just to make sure we have everyone in safe and cozy. So guys, you'll all see, if you hover along your screen, you'll see along the bottom, about in the middle, there's a chat bubble. So in there, we can all chat to each other. Please do jump on and let us know where it is that you're tuning in from. And if you see just to the side of that, there's also a Q&A. So the Q&A is where we'd like you to put all of your questions for our panelists. And in then I'll ask the questions to them at the end. So just keep the questions coming in there throughout. Make sure you're putting them into the Q&A and not the chat box, just in case they get missed in the chat. But I see we've people chatting in there as well. We've got Donegal, Clonakilty, Limerick City, Bear Island. It's great to see some representation from all over the country. Athenry, Kylemore, Portobello. Great crowd in today. Right, so we should have pretty much everyone in there as well now. And just so you all know, we are recording this session and it will be going on our YouTube channel as soon as possible as well. So we'll put it out on our social media to let you know that it's been uploaded. So if there's anything that you missed throughout the day, don't worry about it. You'll be able to refer back. And of course, we're always here if you want to shoot us an email as well. We're always just at the end of the computer. Okay. So I'll get us started with the agenda for the day. So I will share this with you here now. So this is our agenda. As you can see, like I said, pretty jam-packed day we've got. So it's going to be my job as taskmaster to keep everyone to their times. So apologies if I do seem a little didactic in that manner. So for those of you that don't know me, because I'm pretty new to the Heritage Council, my name is Valerie Kelly and I'm the Community and Public Engagement Officer. I'm going to be doing our welcome and introductions at 11:30, so that's what I'm doing now. Welcome. I've introduced myself. Then we're going to have Amanda talking about the actual grant itself. So any questions that come up while she's talking, pop them in the Q&A and I'll give them to her at the very end of her session. Then I'll come back to your screens and I'll talk to you about Heritage Week and using social media and as well acknowledging funding. After that, we're going to have 30 minutes of a Q&A time, or if we get finished earlier, we'll have more time for Q&A. So that's when I'll put all the questions to Amanda and get your answers live. Then we're going to take a well-needed break, I think, from 1 till 2. At 2 o'clock, then we're going to come back and we're going to have sessions for each of our professional officers where they will talk about their specific area. They'll give a presentation or talk to you about it, and then they'll answer Q&A, and that will all be within 30-minute sessions. So as you can see here, we have Colin Murray at 2 o'clock to talk about built heritage. We have Lorcan Scott at 2:30 to talk about wildlife. Leslie Ann Hayden is in at 3 talking about care of collections. Ian Doyle at 3:30 for archaeology, and Alison Harvey at 4 o'clock for town centres and village regeneration. So if you are only interested in one of those specific areas, or if your community group or organisation is more focused in that area, don't feel that you have to stay on all day because it is quite a long day to be on a computer screen. You can just pop in and out. I'll be here letting people in and out of the session in the background. So don't worry about checking back in with us later on in the day if there's something that's specifically more relevant to you, or if you're not looking for specific info, you can drop out at lunchtime as well. I won't take it personally. So first off, I'm going to come back to you here now, and I'm going to queue up Amanda, who's going to talk to you about the grants as well. And just a final note as well, when you are applying, you can apply for your grants Oscuelga. That's also an option too. So there's Amanda now, and I will just get her spotlighted so that you can all see her. Sorry now, just one moment. There you go, Amanda.
Thank you, Valerie. Hi, everyone. It's great to have such a big audience here today. And thank you again for taking the time to attend our event today. So I'm going to briefly just run through this very short PowerPoint presentation, gleaning from the points that are in the booklet or the information guidelines. It's an 18-page document, so it is quite long. So I've just put together something very brief to run through that, and I'm sure a lot more will come up in the questions and answers. So I'll start away. So basically, this is just the key dates for you. So the scheme opened on the 14th of January and we close on the 16th at 5 p.m. All applications must be through the Heritage Council's online grant system, the link to which is on the funding page of our website. Now, when I say 5 p.m., it is 5 p.m. It's automatically shuts down. So please, I can't stress enough to start your application as quickly as soon as possible, and you can log in and out and save information. Most importantly, to upload the supporting document, because this can slow the process down, especially if you're trying to get it in on Amanda, the last day.
Sorry, yeah? If you need to share your screen again there.
Oh, apologies, sorry. Share.
I can see it, Valerie.
Is that okay, Valerie?
Yes, I can see it as well, Valerie. I wonder, is it the participants who can't see it?
I should be able to.
Oh, sorry about this.
Just
now.
one moment.
Oh, sorry, only I see here, only all panelists.
No, you can share. And then I'll remove your spotlight for a moment and maybe that. Okay, try now.
I'll stop and I'll start again.
Oh, here, I know what it was. Sorry. Yeah, if you share that again, Amanda, and just for all of our attendees, you'll see up in the corner on Amanda's screen, it will say view shared content. So it's a matter of whether it's selected to see her shared content or her lovely face.
Are you, this is to the audience, Valerie? Or
yeah, that's, sorry, yeah, that's just for people individually that need to have that set up. Sorry, carry on.
Now, okay, can everyone see that now? I hope so.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So yes, I was, okay, I see people raising their hands, great. So yes, 5 p.m. deadline. We have an increase this year of 0.5 million. So last year our scheme was to the value of about 1 million. This year we've 1.5 million. We've also introduced a minimum request of €2,000. So you can't look for seek a grant less than that. And the maximum request is actually, that's incorrect. It's actually, apologies, it's 20,000 this year, not 15,000. So that has increased by 5,000 from last year to 20,000 this year. The outcome will be notified to you in writing mid-April 2022, and you cannot start your project until after this offer date, and it must be completed by the 19th of September. On your budget, you must show a contribution, a minimum contribution of 20%, but that can be through valuing your voluntary time. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So just quickly on the screen, on the assessment, there's basically 4 stages. Firstly, we screen all applications that come in, and that's to check that basic criteria has been met in terms of supporting documentation, the time frame, that a Heritage Week event will be undertaken. It's basic information to check the basic information has been presented in the application. If you don't pass this stage, your application will be rejected and won't be brought any further. So projects that pass this stage then go on to the professional officer assessments, and they score them. There's also then a recommended list goes to an external panel for assessment, and then finally board approval in mid-April. I should say, after the internal professional officer assessment, depending on the amount of applications we receive, we may, and it is most likely that shortlisting will take place. That means after scoring that we'll be looking at those applications that got the highest scores. Last year, I believe we took applications that scored 20 and above and brought them onto the next stage. You must, under each criteria, you must score a minimum of 3 to pass this stage as well. There's 5 marks for each criteria. I just move on. So who can apply? It's voluntary community groups, including charitable trusts. Private trusts are not eligible. Heritage-related NGOs, not-for-profit heritage organisations, MSPI participants, and they can also be in a local authority museum, adopt monument programme participants, and new for this year is 2nd and 3rd level educational bodies, again excluding private organisations. So applications from any other organisations, whether that's public bodies, private companies, or most importantly, individuals, will not be considered. So actually, just on the individuals, make sure when you're putting in your application that you put it in the name of the organisation and not an individual's name. This has happened in the past and has resulted in applications not passing the screening stage. So make sure that the organisation is the applicant. I should also say that the organisation, if offered funding, will be the payee. So make sure your organisation has an active credit union or bank account so the payment can be made to that. We cannot make payments to other individuals or other bodies once the offer is made. Oh, now, sorry, I don't know what I did there. Apologies. I probably have to share. I clicked off it. I beg your pardon. Share. Okay, can you see that screen? Oh, yes, yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened there. Okay, so making your application. The application is a template form. It's very generic. So answer the questions as concisely and briefly as possible. You will be encouraged to upload additional information. So use pages 9 to 15 of the guidance document to look as a checklist, really, to look at what is needed in terms of supporting documentation for your specific type of project. We have them outlined under each section. So make sure that you have included all those documents. All projects must include quotations or evidence of where the figures in your budget came from. Photographs are a must also, and please provide, especially for building repairs to conservation repairs to buildings, current photographs. Evidence of heritage advice. This is very important. We are really policing that this year to ensure that all projects are properly supervised and that the appropriate person is providing the necessary heritage advice. Letters of support are crucial. That can be from other community groups, local businesses. A must is your local heritage officer, a local biodiversity officer, or indeed local conservation officer. Approvals and things like owner's consent and a map may not be relevant to all. For instance, if your project is about digitization, we don't need a map. We possibly don't need owner's consent or approvals. However, if you are undertaking works to a church, we do need approval or consent from the parish. We also need approvals if it's a protected structure. It may need a declaration or planning permission. So that kind of information is required at application stage. Colin in the afternoon will talk more about that, but that's to give you a general idea of the type of information that's needed for all applications. Budget. Please ensure that you include your minimum contribution of 20%. This is really important. Groups last year didn't do this correctly, and it impacted negatively on the offer of funding we were able to give them. Again, I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. And you can do this by valuing your voluntary work. It needn't be a cash contribution. And very important as well is demonstrate that you're willing to communicate and promote your project throughout or in the communication section of the application. Valerie will talk a bit more about this, but this is crucial. I have seen it has happened in the past where we've had so many applications and we hadn't enough funding, which happens annually. And it is the communication section is used as a way, as a part of the process of prioritizing applications once we've shortlisted them by their score. So that section is really important. Our grants are a little bit different to maybe other grantee bodies you deal with. We are all about raising awareness, increasing knowledge, reaching out to new audiences. So this is really key in your application. So what can groups apply for? There's a specific list on the booklet, and there's also a specific list of ineligible costs. Now, obviously, this list isn't fully exhausted, so there may be other items that we fund that I haven't included here, but this is general guidance. Professional fees for supervision of your project. Again, make sure if you are doing a project that you account for this in your budget. Contractors costs, obviously, for conservation to a building, object or site, and that could be a paper conservator, it could be a contractor to repairs, to carry out repairs to a building, regular third-party supplier costs, project dedicated contracted staff. This is where organisations intend to increase a part-time contract of an existing staff member, but please include a letter of confirmation from your CEO or director. Travel and subsistence costs for volunteers, professional fees for suitably qualified practitioner to undertake. So basically that is, if you get a commissioner report, it's the professional fee to cover that, and also professional fees to undertake training. And general advice would be, don't assume that the assessors know your work. This is a general pitfall with a lot of return applicants. Because they have got grant funding in the past, they assume that everyone looking at their application will know all about the wonderful work they do. But every year we have different external panel members looking at projects, and not all of them may know what you're doing. So pitch your application like you're doing it really for the first time. Explain it clearly, what the impact will be and what the outcomes are going to be. Supporting documents must be saved in PDF or JPEG format. Please don't put up Word documents or Excel documents. They may not open correctly for us at the other end. And again, this could impact on the assessment of your application. Maximum is 10 megabytes per document. Name files relevant content. This is really important. If you're putting up images, or images especially, or photographs of your collection, please name the files relevant to the content. Don't use any kind of symbols or characters in your file name. All files will be checked for viruses when they're uploaded, so don't panic if you see this notice. If you're uploading them between now and the final date, the virus check is done very quickly, but on the last day, it could take anything from 5 minutes to 2 hours. So as I said, don't panic. Again, start your application as soon as possible and save, and uploading information as it becomes available. I can't stress this enough. Traffic on the system on the final day is really, really heavy. I think something like possibly 80% of our applications are submitted on the last day, and this can potentially slow the process down. And I've had so many panicked phone calls at 5:05 or 2 minutes past 5 where people have been shut out of the system and have been trying to upload information. We can't do anything for you at 5:05, but if you contact us at 10:05, there is a strong possibility we will. So if you have any issues with the system or uploading or anything like that, please contact us in advance. Don't leave it till after the 5 p.m. deadline. And just for contacting the Heritage Council, we are still working remotely. Valerie's email address is there and my own email address, and that's my mobile number. And if you want to ring between 12 and 4 p.m. Monday to Friday with any queries, we'll certainly try and help you. And I think we will. Personally, I wish you all the very best in your application, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions and answers. So, and one thing I didn't say, and I always say it, is please read the information guidelines. That is so important, because the answer to your question may be there and you may miss something. And so it's really important to be very clear on what's expected in terms of the application. We expect this scheme to be very competitive. So unfortunately, tough decisions have to be made on our end, and the assessment process is quite ruthless. Like for instance, at screening, if you're supposed to upload a map and you haven't a map, your application could be screened out on that alone. So as I said, really important that you're very familiar with what is expected in terms of your application. Okay, thanks for now. Over to Valerie.
Thanks, Minnie and Amanda. And we've got some great questions coming through there, guys, so do keep them coming. Pop myself here and I will share my screen here. I've got two presentations for you. So I've got one about Heritage Week itself and another about acknowledgement of funding. So I'll pop the first one up here. Yeah, get our slideshow going. So National Heritage Week is coordinated by the Heritage Council as part of the European Heritage Days, a joint initiative of the Council of Europe and the European Union, in which more than 50 countries participate each year. Prior to 2020, National Heritage Week was very much events focused, but then with public health restrictions around social gatherings and all of the multitude of accommodations we've all had to make in our daily lives due to COVID-19, the decision was made in 2020 and 2021 to adapt National Heritage Week. So we've gone from being more events focused to more project focused. And we worked with the heritage sector and community groups to support them in delivering an online celebration of heritage. And as I'm sure you'll all agree, it was absolutely fantastic to see how different communities really adapted to a bizarre and strange version of events that none of us were used to. So yeah, moving on, we had a great rate of participation when we moved to online events. So the rate of participation, it really exceeded any expectations that we had. We had over 850 creative heritage projects uploaded to the Heritage Week website in 2020. And then in 2021, we saw an innovative blend of over 1,000 online projects and live outdoor events. So this really kept National Heritage Week as vibrant as ever, even with restrictions in place and with difficulties making life a little bit harder for people. But everyone just really took to it like ducks to water, really. The online projects ranged from talks, exhibitions, videos, podcasts, PowerPoint presentations, blogs, media coverage, dedicated websites, social media accounts. And of course, we did still have some outdoor in-person events, obviously all within social distancing guidelines. So here are the dates for Heritage Week 2022. So you can see them there, 13th to the 21st of August. So get those in your calendar now, because I know it seems like it's a long way away, but planning starts in February. So we really need to get knuckled down as early as possible with Heritage Week. Now, this is really important. All Heritage Council grantees are required to participate in National Heritage Week. So keep that in mind when you're filling out your form. It will need to be factored into your work plan. And it's likely that we'll maintain the online element as well this year, just because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen next week, never mind in August. So we would definitely like to keep a blend of in-person and online events, obviously all in keeping with whatever restrictions we might have at the time. So during National Heritage Week, there are a number of individually themed days that focus on different areas. These are Water Heritage Day and Wild Child Day. So Water Heritage Day is the second Sunday of National Heritage Week, and it's held in partnership with the local authority Waters programme. And it focuses on celebrating our lakes, canals, rivers, seas, wetlands, and our connection to all these different bodies of water. Wild Child Day then is usually held on the Wednesday of Heritage Week. And that's a day that's all about engaging children with nature. So we ask our different event organisers to create events that are suitable for children and families on this day. So it's a real all ages kind of day. We have themes for Heritage Week, and the theme in 2021 was all around inclusivity and reaching out to those who have never engaged in National Heritage Week before. So individuals who don't usually feel included in their local heritage, be they newer communities, minorities, and such and so forth. We also encourage organisers to include different age groups in their heritage projects. And you'll see for our Heritage Week awards this year, we had a number of different themed categories, and you can see them listed there. There's Heritage Newcomers, Heritage Sharing, and Heritage for All Ages. So looking ahead to 2022, as I said, planning starts in February, which is just around the corner. So we need to get our Heritage Week hats on ASAP. The theme announced by the Council of Europe's European Heritage Days for 2022 is Sustainable Heritage. So be sure to keep that in the back of your minds when you're filling out your form and factoring it into your work plan, as I said earlier. We'll likely retain the project element that we introduced in 2020. And again, we're looking at a hybrid mix of online and in-person events. And it's quite nice in a way that that also allows us to broaden events. So you're not just having your local community, you can also involve diaspora. So it's a really wonderful way for people all over the world to be able to connect with their local heritage, be it the place they currently live or their ancestral home. So I'll finish that one and I'll come to you with my next presentation on acknowledging funding. So it is required of you that you acknowledge all Heritage Council funding in your publications, and this presentation is going to talk through the different areas that covers. So the Heritage Council is proud to be associated with many great organisations dedicated to undertaking some of the country's most important heritage, conservation and research work. And the funding that we provide goes to helping all these amazing operations and programs, supporting research and seeing communities grow and develop a stronger relationship with their local heritage. So the reason that we need you to acknowledge our funding is because we need to ensure that public awareness is raised of how public money is spent. And it also helps show the breadth of work being undertaken in the sector while encouraging public interest, ownership and engagement. The Heritage Council has a complex national brief across natural, built and cultural heritage, and this places an exciting, sometimes challenging, but always welcome reliance on us to work with others to achieve common aims. By acknowledging the Heritage Council funding, you are helping to improve public understanding of how we are all working together to develop our knowledge and protect our artefacts, monuments, folklore and environment. So, how to acknowledge the funding? This is all based on the amount of funding you're getting proportional to your costs. So if you're getting 50% or more of your funding from the Heritage Council, you would describe it as being funded by the Heritage Council. And you can see there an example of what that would look like. Where it's under 50%, you would describe it as being supported by the Heritage Council. And again, we have an example there. Where the Heritage Council has led the establishment of an organisation or project and provided staff support as well as financial resources, that is where we would ask you to refer to it as a Heritage Council initiative. And then on projects where your organisation has worked with the Heritage Council to achieve a particular outcome, acknowledgement should reflect that by saying that it was undertaken in partnership with the Heritage Council. And lastly, where members of your organisation have led a project and the Heritage Council has part funded or provided other support such as advice and guidance, acknowledgement should refer to the project as having been undertaken in association with the Heritage Council. Now, I know that's a lot to take on and a lot to remember, so don't worry about frantically trying to take notes, because this will all be on YouTube and you'll be able to have a read back through it and refer to it as you go through your application and your acknowledgement process. So where to acknowledge us? So the Heritage Council must be acknowledged in digital information channels, printed publicity and information materials and project outputs. So you can see the list that includes there. So online presence, so your website, social media, electronic newsletters, digital magazines, any printed or online publications and reports, printed publicity materials, so flyers, events, programs, posters, brochures, leaflets, newsletters, press releases, the list goes on. Site signs, information boards, interpretation panels, advertising, educational materials and presentations, CD and DVD sleeves and any related product packaging, film, television and online video credits, job advertisements, and any materials where other sponsors or supporters are mentioned or credited. So that doesn't include your stationery, don't worry about that. And if you have received funding or support from a number of different organisations, then acknowledgement of the Heritage Council should be in proportion to the amount of funding or support received from other organisations. So what that means is that if the Heritage Council has provided the majority of the funding, then its acknowledgement should receive precedence over acknowledgement from other funders. So this means that you're going to have to display our logo. The logo, it must be displayed in accordance with our guidelines. These and our logo can be downloaded at the link there, and you'll also be able to get this off YouTube as well. So the website and newsletters and organisations in receipt of Heritage Council funding must also acknowledge in writing that their organisation or project has received Heritage Council funding. You must also display the current Heritage Council logo on the website homepage and any credits or supporter pages. The logo must be used at the appropriate resolution and in accordance with the guidelines. And as I say, the guidelines are there for you to refer back to as much as you need to. And you must also provide a link to the Heritage Council website. Social media. Now, this is a great way to promote your event. And also we ask that you acknowledge our funding there. So the Heritage Council has a very active social media presence and we're across a number of platforms. And we do ask that you tag us. And it also gives us an opportunity to then share with our followers information about your organisation or event. So on Facebook, you need to link to our Facebook page, which is at the Heritage Council. You need to link to that in all of your posts, put in a sentence acknowledging support from the Heritage Council and include your hashtags, hashtag the Heritage Council, hashtag love your heritage. And you'll see there a template of what that should look like. On Twitter, our handle is at HeritageHubIRE, and we ask that you tag us in any posts about your project. Acknowledgement of support from the Heritage Council should be included in each tweet. And again, you see there an example of that. For Instagram, if your project involves photography, Instagram is a great way to reach a wider audience. Please do tag us in your posts. We are at the Heritage Council. And as well, if you're putting up any stories, be sure to tag us, because then once we see them, we'll see everything that's been tagged and we can reshare it. And again, it's a great way for us to get information out about you, as well as for you to acknowledge your funding from us. Now, with publications, in accordance with the Heritage Council grants policy, all grantee publications, including research publications, reports, annual reports, information leaflets, press releases, and any other publications or documents concerning research that is funded by the Heritage Council, must include a specific acknowledgement of Heritage Council grant support. So that should read something like, research reported in this publication was funded or supported by the Heritage Council. You must also include a disclaimer, and that will say the content of this publication is solely the responsibility of the authors and does not necessarily represent the official views of the Heritage Council. And you must also display our logo in accordance with the guidelines. With printed publicity materials, so that's your flyers, events, programs, posters, brochures, info leaflets, etc. You do also have to acknowledge the Heritage Council grant support with a sentence like funded by or supported by the Heritage Council. And again, you must include our logo in accordance with the guidelines. So that's the end of my presentation. So I think we're doing pretty good for time. So we've got 55 minutes for Q&A, and I see 28 questions already in the Q&A, and absolutely do keep popping them in. And I will start asking Amanda some questions now.
One second, Valerie, sorry. One thing I forgot to include in Anna, because it was on a separate screen, was to briefly talk about the budget section, which is, so do you mind if I just bring it up now? Sorry about this. So wait, I'm not, where's share? Do you stop sharing? Okay. I'll just be brief if I can locate it. Okay, share. So can everyone see that? Yeah. So basically, this is the budget page of the application. So this is where you will put in, enter your costs. And I've just, I have just entered a few items now, just one I prepared earlier. So basically, to make sure for supervision, all projects must be supervised, and you must include a cost for that in your application. So conservation, I'm just put down is €3,000, conservation work 7,000. So total third-party expenditure is now 10,000 euros, and as a group I am seeking 10,000 euros from the Heritage Council, but I must show my 20% contribution. So I have just filled out here, so this is voluntary, project management, PR on social media, which does take a bit of time, organising my Heritage Week event and ensuring that I promote it and encourage as many people to be involved as possible. So I put in an estimated cost of about 600 euros there. So for my site, I'm going to need to clear vegetation. So I'm allowing for 2 people to do this for a week at a cost of approximately 500 euros. And then my our fundraising efforts in the past to have raised about 1,000 euros that we can put towards our project. So basically here I've met the 20% contribution. I've actually come over it by 100 euros. So I'm looking for costs of 10,000 euros. I'm showing now the value of the project is 12,100. So make sure to put your contribution in this section this section here, and the costs that you are seeking from the Heritage Council up in this section. It is a little bit confusing. It's one we struggle with as well. So we changed it a little bit this year to try and make it clear for you applying and also for us assessing. Now, in the past, we did have guidelines for valuing voluntary labour at, I think it was €300 a day professional fee and about, I think it was €75 unskilled. But I suppose just to keep in line with national rates, you could base it maybe on the 10.50, or is it 10.50 or 10.60 now per hour, or indeed a relative daily rate of pay. So, but you can keep it as general but be reasonable. So that would be kind of the advice there. But as I said, we can't offer funding of 10,000 if, for instance, you're only giving 11,000, or you're only showing a value of 11,000. We would have to pare back that 10,000 to 9,000 to make sure that only a maximum of 80% was offered to the project. So I'm sure you'll have questions about the budget section. As I said, it's one we have struggled with in terms of trying to make it as clear as possible, and also which I know you as applicants have found difficult. But if in doubt, I would also suggest maybe that you upload a separate document if you feel that the template isn't answering or displaying how you want your budget to be displayed. You are more than welcome to upload a separate document, but I would say put a note in it, see uploaded document or something to that effect. And also, if you are getting funding from any other source, please record it under this table here too. This is important, and it's also important for you to be mindful that if you are offered funding from the Built Heritage Investment Scheme, that we are obliged to, if you're offered funding from ourselves, we are obliged at a drawdown stage to pare back or decrease our grant if it to be in line with their condition of maximum 50% public funding. We will, if you are offered funding from us, we will be hosting another Zoom workshop after you are offered funding to go through the terms and conditions. And also we're planning an additional Zoom workshop in advance of drawdown so that we can go through what you need to upload on the system in terms of final reporting and your expenditure, proof of expenditure. We will be seeking a derogation or a special sanction from the department to allow us to pay grants based on invoices only. That means that you don't have to prove that you have your supplier or your third-party costs paid in advance of drawing down a grant from us. Another question that I know always comes up, we don't give, if you are offered funding, we don't pay out the grant straight away. You can apply through the online system about 50% through the project for a 50%, up to a 50% interim payment, but you must show a progress report and copies of expenditure, i.e. invoices to date. And then we pay the final balance when the project is completed. So I'm sure there will be questions on the budget, so I'll leave it for now so that we can get on to the questions and answers.
Thanks a million, Amanda. And I just had a few people asking me to share the agenda again, so I will pop that up. Where is it? There we go. So you can see our agenda for the afternoon there, so that people take a note of that. And I have quite a few questions for you here, so I hope you're ready for
some water.
for a quick fire round. Okay, at the research stage, new group volunteers tidying up and wanting to bring a graveyard back to life. Are we a bit premature? We need to protect the wall structure from rain following ivy dying.
This question, when you say premature, is it about the nature of works? Ian will be on later this afternoon. He's our archaeological officer and he would be able to go more into the technical side. I don't know where this group is from, but I would certainly suggest you liaise with your local authority, heritage officer, conservation officer. There is also a very good care of graveyards, I know I haven't the right title, on our website that I would certainly refer you to. Colin also may be able to provide a little more on that if he can, but that is something that would be subject possibly to planning, national monuments section, but I would, in terms of the group as a newly formed group, you don't have to be constituted, but you do have to have a working bank account or credit union account, because if you're awarded funding, the group will be the payee. So I'm sorry now, I can't go into more technical advice there, but as I said, Ian will be available in the afternoon, and Colin might be able to give little advice too on the chat answer area.
We've had a couple of questions along the same sort of theme about multiple applications. So one person wondering if their organization can apply 2 separate applications for their communities in different areas. Another person asking if an application can be made jointly between a community group and a museum. And then we had another asking if they can apply for this if they've already applied for another fund, so the Heritage Capacity Fund, for example.
Okay, so first with the organisation, first in general, we will have to prioritise applications. So if you have applied for funding, we'll say under the Heritage Capacity Fund, and you're awarded funding, we won't really be funding more applications under another scheme. We're trying to spread the fund as much as possible. However, if one application comes in under the community grant scheme and you make a strong case for why it should be funded, it will be assessed on that basis. But as I said, I know last year one group made a successful application under our Heritage Capacity Fund, also made multiple applications under our Community Heritage Grant Fund for various projects. And unfortunately, this was quite a bit of waste of time for the group, because as it transpired, we only offered funding to one of those applications, and we just prioritized. We have to spread the funding as wide a net as possible. So while you're not exempt, we would urge caution. For the other group that was talking about, other question about a group who was thinking about applying for 2 grants for, now I might have this wrong, for a group in different counties. I say, why not apply for put in one application for the 2 projects that are based in different counties, and just make sure that it's all under the one umbrella organisation that, if offered funding, will be the payee. I hope that answers that question. And the other, absolutely, if you are partnered with a museum, that's a very strong application, but the application must come in from the community, in the name of the community group. The community group would be the payee, and make sure to upload a letter of partnership or support from the museum.
Okay. We also had a number of questions about how to place a monetary value on volunteer time. So is there a template or a model for that?
I can look into that further. As I said, we did have guidelines for rates up until this year, but it became a bit problematic for us. So we're trying a new route this year, and that's kind of to base your rates, I suppose, on the national minimum wage, and or a bit above in terms of the level of expertise. For instance, if you have a I'm trying to think of something. If you have an IT professional on your community group and they're willing to do all sorts of fancy things online to showcase your project or indeed help in other ways, obviously their kind of normal daily rate could be, because they're offering a professional service as a volunteer. So it naturally it can be costed at their kind of normal rates, but keep the rates reasonable, and we're not going to drill down through them. As long as they're reasonable, they're acceptable.
And we had two more similar questions. So one was about second and third level educational bodies. What projects and actions can be applied for them? Will it include research, public engagement, conference or workshops? And we had a similar question asking, can cooperative organizations, social enterprises apply for the funding?
Yeah, as long as you're a not-for-profit group, I would say, yeah, that's the general rule of thumb, that you're working on a not-for-profit basis. In relation to second and third level, I would go back to the aim of the community grant scheme. It's a capital schemes project. So it's if you can make the case that the research will aid in applying good heritage practice to the management of a place or collections or objects, yes, you can apply. But I would, for that person's query, I will go back to what the aim of the scheme is. It's not intended as an academic research scheme. It's how would I put it? It's about management of sites and objects and collections and things like that. We also support funding of equipment, and new for this year, also training in traditional building skills and crafts, also biodiversity and archaeology. So your projects should be focused along those lines. And I would, especially for universities, their 20% could be made up in overheads and administration, because we don't cover that side in terms of grant funding. So I hope that answers that question.
And that leads on nicely to the next question, which was asking for some more information about what things are eligible as match funding. So you mentioned volunteer hours, but it would be good to know if there are other examples of what our match funding would consist of.
Yeah, fundraising, other fundraising, any cash contribution, anything that's, that puts that has a value that can make up that 20%. Obviously, cash is the most ideal, but it's not always realistic for a lot of community groups. So I suppose that's why I've been focusing on the value of volunteering. But if you have a cash contribution, certainly that's more than welcome. So I hope that answers that. And that can be made up of just your own funds or fundraising, whatever.
And you had mentioned craft skills. So we've had a question, is there a list of what craft skills are eligible, such as fine metalwork, blacksmithing, or is it solely linked to traditional building skills?
Well, again, what you mentioned there, blacksmithing, things like that, that certainly would be eligible. Anything, there is actually traditional skills information on our website, and I can pop the column, if you're still there, you might pop the link in the chat area for people. But yeah, it covers anything that would be considered of a traditional skill that can be increase knowledge and increase capacity in that area.
We have a question here. If a group gets funding from local authority to carry out an assessment on a site, such as flora, bird, bat survey, archaeological assessment, etc., can this be used as 20% of a conservation management plan for the site?
Okay, that's a good question. So it's kind of two, is it not, would that be two separate projects? So you're getting an audit done through with funding from your
local authority.
Okay, and is the audit in, to be honest, I kind of see that as two separate projects. So if you haven't cash funding, again, I would say value your voluntary time. And I would say most of you should have some voluntary contribution anyway to all projects, because Heritage Week, organise an event for Heritage Week is going to take time. Undertaking PR for your project, updating social media, doing a local, if you haven't got social media, doing a local interview, doing a feature for your newspaper, that will all take time, and all that can be valued. It is not, so all groups that are applying to us should have a voluntary contribution that they can actually value as part of their 20% if they are undertaking the project to include public engagement and awareness, which is one of our main criteria for funding.
We've had a couple of questions come in around tenders and quotations.
Okay.
So say for specialist craftspeople, is it required to have more than one tender for the projects? And also another question that came in was around, if you have somebody already who's worked for you, say the previous year, and you're getting them to do more maintenance work on a site, can you go straight to them, or do you have to tender again? And
No,
how many quotations are required?
We require one quotation. Value for money is one of the criteria that we assess under. So we will be happy with one quotation as long as it shows value for money. We don't gear voluntary groups. We don't expect you to go through procurement or tendering, and I suppose value for money and having confidence in the ability of the person to undertake the work to a proper or good standard is what we're looking for.
Okay, and kind of on a similar vein to that, there's been a question about, can we use the same level of labour costs as per last year for the manual skilled specialist costs?
The manual, yeah, as long as it's a reasonable cost.
Okay. Short question, what if the project is not finished on time?
What if the project's not? Oh my, who is that person? We are under, it is a short, we accept it is a short turnaround to deliver your project. And I suppose that's why we would advise that making your application, that you keep the project realistic within that time frame to ensure that you can meet it. Now, obviously, from time to time, delays do happen that are outside, for instance, it could be something to do with planning, or so I don't know, but there are times that and actually a good example was this year with COVID, some contractors got COVID, of course that delayed projects. So if there is an exceptional reason, we will look at it. I'm not saying we can give an extension, but we will look at it. And I would say that if you're offered funding, keep in contact. If there's any issues at all, please let us know as soon as possible, because we may be able to help at that stage, but coming to us at the deadline date of the 19th of September and saying, oh, my project isn't finished, we're 2 weeks behind, it does make it very problematic for us. So again, keep in contact, but we would be looking at projects and when we're assessing projects, we will be looking to make sure that they can be achieved within that deadline.
Okay, so back to the topic of match funding, but
yes.
in a different vein, can Heritage Council funding be used as match funding for RRDF or European funding?
Can it be used as match funding? I'm not really clear on that question.
So say if you were going for European funding
Yeah.
and you needed a certain amount of match funding, could you use your apply for Heritage Council funding to be that match funding for Europe?
So it's not really to undertake a project.
Doesn't
Well,
yeah,
if that's the base of it, it's just no. Yeah, our funding is project specific. There's a start deadline. You have to show us what you did. So no, I don't see that it would.
So then with projects that are multi-phase ones, will receiving a grant in 2021 for phase 1 of our project reduce the likelihood of not passing the screening process for 2022?
The only reason you wouldn't pass the screening process is that you don't upload the relevant information. That question, good question, actually, it would be supportive of your application if you've already completed phase 1 and now you're going on to phase 2. So we certainly welcome an application, but I would stress caution here as well, because it has happened to groups in the past where we have been funding them through different stages. They were coming along the lines, made their application and fell into the trap of assuming that the assessors knew their application and left out key documents, and we weren't able to fund them. So as I said, treat each application like it's your first one, make your case. New people will be looking at their application. They may not know what your project is about. But yes, absolutely. If you've been funded by us in the past for various phases, and actually we encouraged phase work. So yes, absolutely, we welcome your application. Just make sure you put up all the information.
And around proving your match funding and fundraising, do they have to show a bank statement with match funding in place, and what evidence of fundraising will be required?
We don't actually require evidence. It's trust-based. So, and I would say our terms and conditions do not include match funding criteria. So if we award you, if you're applying for 10,000, you show us that you valued your contribution by way of what you're going to do during the project in terms of public engagement or helping with labour work or anything like that. We will offer the 10,000 and we will pay the 10,000 once you have an invoice for that amount or over. We don't look for match funding at drawdown stage. We use this information that you're putting in at application stage to I suppose it's to encourage volunteering. It's also to acknowledge volunteering, and it also helps us in reporting for additional funding going forward, that we can make the case that a lot of our grants depend on a huge value and contribution from volunteers on the ground.
Who must you get heritage advice from?
Well, first and foremost, I'd say there is a heritage officer now in every county, so absolutely contact your local heritage officer. If it's built heritage, there is the RIAI have a website and a register of conservation consultants. But definitely, first and foremost, I would contact your local heritage officer as the first port of call for advice. And it depends obviously on the nature of your project, be it biodiversity, archaeology, but as I said, your heritage officer is a very good port of call, first port of call.
Are project-related travel expenses for heritage-related non-governmental organisation staff members, not volunteers, eligible expenses?
We don't exclude. I actually will have to check on that, because we're excluding expertise of in-house or volunteers. Expertise costs. We're excluding, if you're a volunteer organisation made up of, we'll say, a group of ecologists, and you want to undertake a project, we will cover the costs of if you need to purchase specialized equipment, or if you need to travel or subsistence. However, we cannot cover your expertise cost in terms of reporting or anything like that. But sorry, am I going off train? Was this for staff members of an NGO?
It was, yeah, not volunteers specifically.
Not volunteers. I'll have to check on that. My understanding is that because it's exclusive to the project, it's an additional cost to the organisation or the group, that it would be considered an eligible cost.
Okay. There's a question here about a project that goes over multiple phases over the years. So with somebody wondering if they need to get new business letters of support and cross-community letters of support, or are the ones from 2021 sufficient?
I would suggest maybe getting, well, you'll I include a letter of support from your local heritage officer. If it would be good if you could get perhaps one or two more current ones, but a letter of support from your local heritage officer. And on your application, I would refer to the fact that you did initially include lots of letters of support for the project in 2021 successful application.
Okay. Would the grant scheme include the funding of plaques? This is a situation where Dublin City Council have approved the installation of 6 small plaques, but they must be self-funded.
No, not really, no, because we are really for information boards and interpretation. We are really only looking at those that address or assist people with disabilities. So it would be a very low priority, and indeed could be a no.
Can a local group apply for funding for an assessment of a heritage building which is owned by the OPW?
I'd imagine that would be up to the OPW, as that is their core responsibility. So I wouldn't.
Valerie, can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I've answered that in the questions and answers section.
Okay.
And there are very few buildings that wouldn't benefit from a letter of support from the OPW if you were going to do a project or do an appraisal of such a building. If you can, without their support, you'll only be able to see what someone on the street can see, and that may not be the full answer, not a satisfactory way of looking at the building. So I've answered that question in the chat.
And Colin, would that not be their core responsibility? Sorry, we're kind of giving
Yes, it is. But I think we'll hear from people who will say that they've neglected their particular area of the country. And in fairness, that might well be true. I know quite a few OPW sites that are might be years since anyone from the OPW visited them, and I hope I'm not slandering anyone by saying that, but there's some very quiet places around the country, shall I say.
Okay, so I suppose make the case.
Yes.
Okay.
And if at all possible, the support. It really is important for us that the owner of the land or the thing is engaged in the process, because the grant will fail if they shut the gate. You know, and our offer will be wasted. It'll be money we could have given to someone else. So we really need to see that you have the active support of the person who has most control over the thing or the place.
Absolutely.
Okay. Can professional supervision be voluntary as opposed to paid?
Professional supervision, if it can, of course, yes, and that can be made up of your 20%, but I would if that, I would caution on that. I mean, I don't know what the professional supervision is, but for instance, if it's a building, repairs to a building, really that needs, that is really a paid supervisory role, because there's a certain amount involved, and as part of, if you're offered funding, as part of the drawdown, you will be expected to include a report prepared by the conservation consultant supervising the project to outline the works and to certify that they have been completed to conservation, good conservation standard. So it depends on the nature of the project, but in general, it would be considered a paid role.
Okay. Would the hiring of an artist be acceptable?
Well, anything, third-party costs are third-party costs, and they are acceptable. But again, it depends on, it's really the project. The project has to be of heritage value. So if that means you're going to get an artist to interpret something for heritage, yes, absolutely.
And then in a similar vein, we had a question about a lifeboat restoration project. So this person is wondering about the cost of storing the lifeboat. They have fees charged by the council for storing in the harbour.
That is, see, that's not, that wouldn't be considered project specific. So if it was repairs to the boat, heritage boat, yes, but long-term storage, that's not really project start and finish, and that's something that needs long-term planning, and it wouldn't really fall within the category of these grants.
Okay. If donations are contributed towards a project, could that be classed as cash voluntary contributions? So for example, if a contribution of €1,000 was donated from a supporter of an NGO.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, yes. Anything that's can go towards the project. Yes, absolutely.
We have a question here about, you mentioned earlier about organizations, if they apply for, say, like the Heritage Capacity Fund, and they apply for the Community Grant Scheme. So they're asking if they would have received the larger of the two, but I imagine it would be whichever is more relevant to the project.
Yes, and I will say, if you have applied for the Heritage Capacity Fund, we're actually going through those at the moment. So if there is a case that some of those may not be eligible, or we will contact you individually to make sure that you have time to apply for the Community Heritage Grant Scheme. And there are two different schemes. So the capacity one was about core costs, which would be salaries, overheads, things like this, like that. This community grant scheme is about project costs. So that's usually third-party fees or third-party charges. So they're slightly different. They're very different, actually. Sorry, I should say slightly.
This is an interesting one, and something that I think is going to come up more and more just with the age that we live in with technology. Yes. So we have somebody who is the admin of a local history Facebook group in West Donegal, and they've collected a huge amount, like over 20,000 photos and items of interest. But with looking to move off Facebook, is it possible to get funding to secure an archive, or to archive to get somebody to archive all of that information and all of the resources?
I suppose if you can, getting someone to archive information, yes, absolutely falls within it, but it depends on your specific project, the heritage value, and while the cost, yes, but I suppose, again, that's where the competitiveness of the scheme, are you making the case that this is really important, it's going to have a long-term impact? But yes, absolutely. Archiving does fall under the scheme, yes.
We have a couple of questions here about specific jobs that need to be done on buildings. So say fabric insulation, would that be eligible? And integration of renewable energy sources for the building?
That's a very specific question and probably would come up at our 2 o'clock session.
Yeah.
Colin might be able to reply to that person, and maybe if he replies in general so others can see it. I'm afraid that's beyond my technical expertise, so I'll pass that over to Colin.
And I would say anyone that does have specific questions about the areas that are covered this afternoon, do definitely come back and answer them, ask them then, and we'll be able to cover them in more depth. We have a question here. If a group holds a lease or license for a building and they say it's a 5-year license, can that group apply for funding, or would it have to be the actual owner of the building?
No, if you have a long-term lease, you're the leaseholder, so that's fine. Yes, no,
Okay.
that's fine.
And somebody's asking about restoration costs for a family centre. Would that be eligible? But I suppose that depends on the nature of the building and the heritage
And the
value of
works.
the building.
Yes, yeah.
Somebody has also asked they need to replace a floor in a structure, in a protected structure, and are applying to the local council built heritage fund for 50% of the cost. Could they apply to the community fund for some of the remainder?
Again, that is something you'd have to be careful about, because Built Heritage Investment Scheme has criteria, or has terms and conditions that say 50% of your costs cannot exceed public funding. So if you're getting 50% from Built Heritage Fund, the other 50% can, or part of the other 50% can't come from ourselves, unfortunately.
And there was somebody asking there for us to confirm if you can apply for both the capacity grant and this one. So just to reaffirm, yes, you can apply for both.
You can, but I would say be cautious. Yes.
Okay, this one's quite interesting because I know it's something that does come up with the assessment during drawdowns. So this person says it was mentioned that the project could only start after the mid-April announcement. I understand that would make sense for bringing the project public, but what preparation for the project, already buying equipment, etc., could be done before the start of mid-April? Because I know there's some issues with invoices being dated before the offer of the grant and things like that.
So if you bought equipment before, if you're applying to us for the purchase of equipment and you purchase it before the offer date, we can't cover that cost. We can only cover the cost of works that have been completed within that time frame, and invoices need to be dated within that time frame as well.
Okay. Would the commissioning of a set piece for an exhibition being commissioned in collaboration with a minority group be considered appropriate for this funding?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, yes.
We've had a few questions here about specific artifacts and items of interest. So one asking, would a historic dilapidated fountain on public council property be eligible for Heritage Council funding, or would there be a more appropriate funding scheme?
You could apply, but again, you'd have to, first port of call is your local authority, heritage officer. You'd need to have them on board, permissions, everything in place. So definitely it would be something we'd look at, but again, you'd have to have all the preparation work in place in terms of consents and approvals.
Okay. There's been a question about charity status as well. Is charity status okay?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, we love charity status. Yes, yes.
Community heritage is €20,000 max award. What is the value of maximum possible awards for the other Heritage Council schemes?
Well, our other scheme, which is closed now, the maximum award was 50,000. We don't read. This is the only public, other publicly advertised grant scheme that we will be offering this year. We've no other plans at the moment to offer anything else. The other schemes we offer are very specific to member groups, For instance, we have an Irish Wall Towns grant scheme that will be open shortly, but that's only for members of that network. So this really is the only scheme that will be available to a wider reach of groups.
Okay. We have a question here about a famine exhibition in need of renovation. Would that be eligible for funding?
Yes, well, how do you mean feminine? Like, I'm not really clear on what in renovate. Would you know, Valerie? I don't
suppose
really know
it would,
yeah.
like if it's that you have artifacts within your exhibit that need renovating, or is it your exhibition space?
Yes, or is it replicas? And we're not, replicas wouldn't
the
be
heritage officer, would that
be? And if you that's I'm not 100% clear on what you're referring to there.
Okay. I have a question here about a restored house. So this person has said that their committee restored a house a few years ago. And though they managed for a few years to have a community employment scheme member working in the house, giving guided tours, talks, and running events, that hasn't been possible in the past 3 years. Could we use part of the funding to employ, for example, third level students for 12 to 16 weeks in the summer to maintain and open the house to the public?
Unfortunately not. That wouldn't really be a priority for us. Yeah, sorry, no.
Yeah, somebody has asked, is there somewhere that I can register as a volunteer in a professional capacity? Again, probably contact your heritage officer, I would imagine, is the best bet, because they're going to know what organizations in your local authority are needing help. And we've been asked, will there be a third grant scheme this year, trying to best use the time to apply?
No, this is more than likely our only grant scheme this year. As I said, we had 2 last year, but that was due to we had a kind of legacy projects that we weren't able to fund the previous year, so we carried them over. That was an unusual situation, but this year, clean slate, and we're spreading the net wide with our 1.5 million fund, so we won't be offering another scheme this year.
We have a question here about a handball alley. So this was gifted to the local national school a while back, built in the 1940s. So it was a winner in the Adopt a Monument scheme and is now owned by the school and in dire need of repair. At the moment, it's deemed unsafe. Is there any point in setting up a community group to apply for the grant since it belongs to the school?
Okay, right there. And is there, but wait there, the alley was also winner. But is there not an Adopt a Monument group? If the alley was also winner of Adopt a Monument scheme, there must be a group behind that. So I would suggest the group, whoever the group are, the Adopt a Monument group, that they apply, and with the full backing of the local national school, like letters of support and permission, and that would be the way to go forward. And there's been a question about what category this afternoon would the development of digital resources come under. We don't have a specific session on that scheduled. I suppose it depends what area of heritage the resource is going to be. Like, is it going to be biodiversity? Is it going to be built heritage? Archaeology, an online collection? What do you think, Amanda? Yeah, and I would say as well, we don't really have anyone with that kind of expertise in our digital heritage. It's a whole new area. But I would say if you are making an application, and we do welcome applications because it's the way forward, that you need to, while you need heritage advice, you need to have a plan that has been put together by an expert in that area. So that's important, that you're led by somebody that has that level of qualification or expertise. Digitization projects, Leslie Ann will probably be able to cover that in the afternoon, but basically for digitization projects, you must include a statement of how the collection is being looked after and what is the long-term storage for it. So that's important to include in your application. I'm looking at our own guidance here for digitization, or not digitization, digital.
Valerie,
heritage.
could I jump in
Yes.
there?
No, please, Colin, please.
Amanda, yeah. We had a project a few years ago, a European funded project, and it came up with this phrase that was quite new to me, and it's born digital heritage. So stuff that began its life in the web or in social media or on computers. And it is a new arena of heritage that does need to be considered. But I'd have to say, and this is talking against ourselves here, us in the Heritage Council, we're very attached to material things and old things and how you take care of them, and wildlife and so on as well. So it's actually hard for us to get our head around what is valuable if it's born digital at this point in time. Now, I think we would have to accept an application that asserted that there is a born digital heritage. And you were talking to someone from Donegal there who had the Facebook page and all of the images that were collected on it. That is a kind of a good example of born digital heritage. So we'd be trying to grapple with that. We couldn't say no to such an application, but you'd have to work hard to prove that that's something that we should fund, I suppose. And I'm saying that maybe because we're a little bit biased in favor of all of the things in the world that need to be taken care of, that are already in existence, and digital heritage is a new burden on our shoulders. But I think we'd have to say we're open to hearing the case, but we may not be. It might not be top of our priorities. Put it that way. I think I'm making a Heritage Council policy on the hoof, so I have to be very careful about what I say on that front.
I noticed there's quite a few questions come in there towards the end about specific works on buildings. So I would just say with regards to that, if you come back at 2 o'clock, and Colin will be talking about built heritage specifically, and we'll be having a Q&A with him as well. So he'll be able to get more in depth into those questions for you. We've also had a question that I see Lorcan is typing an answer to regarding wildlife and biodiversity. So again, just keep in mind, if you have a specific question that is about your particular area of heritage that you're covering, make sure to pop back in and chat to the professional officers about that. So since we're coming up for 1 o'clock, Amanda, I have one more question for you here that I think might be a good talking point for the actual process of physically filling out the form. We've been asked, is it possible to get a hard copy posted out to us? So if you want to talk about the fact that it's a digital application.
Yes, it's an online application. So a number of people can actually log on and look at the application. It's not, for instance, if you have a committee and you want others to see what you're answering, they certainly can log on and help with the application. Now, if you're really stuck, I can email you a Word copy of the application, but I would say it is just for information only. We don't accept any other format for applications other than they're submitted through the online system. I saw one question there. Now I scroll down quickly, and it was, there seems to be a little bit of confusion about applying for a couple of projects and having to make separate applications. So I would say, even if your projects aren't if you're an organization or group and your projects aren't completely connected, but are in terms of, we'll say this, there's a question here about I've lost it now.
Oh, I put it with it. Yeah, it was about applying for 2 different projects.
Projects that were of kind of care and collections nature. You put that under one application. There's this, we wouldn't encourage you to make 2 separate applications for 2 separate projects. They're both connected in terms of their area of heritage. So put one in on one application for the 2 projects.
And to finish up, Amanda, if you could just clarify about the payout of funds to community groups, what the system is, and the dates around that as well.
Okay, as I said, if you're offered funding, we can organise a 50% drawdown. We don't pay in advance of works. So if your project is approximately 50% complete, you can put in a request through the online system to draw down up to 50%. You must have this supported by a progress report and copies of invoices. And then we pay the balance after the grant is completed. You don't have to have receipts. I do understand there was for last year, 2021, there was delays in payment. However, we are prioritizing resources this year for the grant section. So we should have extra hands on the ground to make sure the payments are made as quickly as possible.
Great, so that brings us almost exactly up to 1 o'clock. So very well timed. Good job, everyone. Thank you all so much for engaging so well with that as well. If you can see there your timings for the afternoon, so if there is someone specifically that you're looking to hear speak, do feel free to pop in and out as is fit. And we will be back on here at 2 o'clock. We're going to take a break to regroup, and then we'll be jumping straight back in at 2. So if you do want to log on a little bit earlier, just to make sure that you're in. And yeah, that would be great. Any further questions as well, you can always email us. If you reply to any of the reminders that you got about this session, they'll come straight to me. And even if it's not a question for me, you can just flag at the top who it's for. I can forward it on if you're having trouble finding anyone's email addresses or anything like that. So thank you so much, Amanda. And thank you, Colin, for coming in there as well. And yeah, we'll have you all, well, we'll have some of you back at 2 o'clock and we'll hear Colin speaking then. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.